7 states had over a century to get this right. They had 104 years. Now they have less than 90 days. A deadline set not by them, but for them. A final, desperate attempt to rewrite the rules for a river that no longer follows any of them. For 40 million people across the American West, the clock is not just ticking, it has almost entirely run out. The agreement that held the system together expires at midnight on December 31st, 2026. Not a single rule, not one operational guideline will carry over. It is a full reset. A negotiated ceasefire in a century-long water war that is about to end, leaving nothing but chaos in its place. The federal government gave the 7 states one last chance, a deadline of February 14th, 2026, to present a unified plan for survival. They missed it. Completely so, the federal government stepped in. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum initiated a process that no one wanted, a federal takeover of the negotiations. A new, hard deadline was set. October 1st, 2026. On that day, a new set of rules will be finalized, with or without the state's approval. The plan that has governed the river for a generation is dead. The question is what comes next. A landmark compromise? Or a legal war that will make its way to the Supreme Court and define the future of the West for the next 100 years? The story of the Colorado River is a story of 2 lakes, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. They are not lakes in any natural sense. They are engineered batteries, massive, sprawling reservoirs designed to store water and electrical potential, holding back the snowmelt of the Rocky Mountains and releasing it on command. They are the twin pillars of the entire system. And both of them are breaking. Right now, as of mid-July 2026, Lake Powell is sitting at an elevation of 3,524.3 feet. That number means nothing to most people. To the engineers who run Glen Canyon Dam, it is a doomsday clock. The minimum power pool, the level at which the dam's turbines can no longer generate electricity, is 3,490 feet. The lake is just 34 feet away from failure. 34 feet. In a reservoir that is hundreds of feet deep, it sounds like nothing. But this is a lake losing almost 4,800 acre-feet of water every single day. The last 34 feet are not a buffer. They are a countdown. When that number hits 0, a 1.3 gigawatt power plant that provides electricity to 6 different states goes silent. Instantly, not just a reduction in power. A complete shutdown. The penstocks, the massive pipes that feed water to the turbines, will begin to suck in air. The generators will spin down. And the dam will become what its harshest critics always feared. A useless concrete plug in the middle of a canyon, holding back a pool of water that can no longer serve its primary purpose. And that is only half of the problem. Below power pool sits true dead pool. At 3,370 feet, the water drops below the lowest possible outlet. No water can pass through the dam at all. Not by gravity, not by force. Nothing flows to Lake Mead. Nothing flows to the 25 million people downstream in Arizona, Nevada, and California who depend on that water to survive. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, is already on the edge of its own history. Its elevation today is 1,042.8 feet. Inches. It is inches away from the all-time record low of 1,040 feet. The infamous bathtub ring, the white line of mineral deposits scarring the canyon walls, is not a memory of a past drought. It is a live, active marker of a system in freefall. Every day, the water recedes and the white scar grows a little taller. Hoover Dam's own dead pool sits at 895 feet, a number that once seemed purely theoretical. Now it appears on federal projection charts. This is the physical reality that negotiators are staring down. A system built on the assumption of abundance, now facing a scarcity so profound that the original engineering can barely cope. 2 lakes, holding the fate of 40 million people, both draining toward failure points that are no longer decades away. They are months away, maybe weeks. The fight over the Colorado River has always been a fight between 2 families, the upper basin and the lower basin. The states of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming make up the upper basin. They live where the snow falls. Their water supply is the river itself, replenished each spring. Or not. In dry years, they argue. They take their shortages naturally. The river simply delivers less. Then there is the lower basin. Arizona, Nevada, California, they do not drink from the river. They drink from the reservoirs. Their entire existence is predicated on water being stored in Powell and Mead, then released on a predictable schedule. For decades, that system worked, because the reservoirs were full. But the math was always broken. The original sin was committed on November 24, 1922, the signing of the Colorado River Compact. The negotiators that day divided a river they did not fully understand. Based on flow data from an abnormally wet period, they allocated 15 million acre-feet of water, 7.5 million for the upper basin, 7.5 million for the lower. The river, we now know, carries closer to 12 or 13 million acre-feet in an average year, sometimes less. They budgeted for water that, in most years, never even existed. They called it paper water, a promise on a document that nature had no obligation to fulfill. For a century, that broken math has been accumulating. The reservoirs acted as a buffer, masking the deficit. But a 25-year megadrought, intensified by a warming climate, has burned that buffer away. The structural deficit is now exposed, and the two families are at war. Becky Mitchell, Colorado's commissioner on the Upper Colorado River Commission, is one of the fiercest voices for the upper states. Her argument is simple. The lower basin has been living on borrowed water for decades, taking more than its rightful share out of the reservoirs. They are the ones with the addiction. They must be the ones to accept permanent, mandated cuts. From her perspective, the upper basin has been living with the reality of a smaller river all along. It's time the lower basin joins them. Downstream, the tone is different. J.B. Hamby, the chairman of the Colorado River Board of California, holds the keys to the largest single water entitlement on the entire river. He is also the youngest major negotiator at the table. He represents an agricultural empire in the Imperial Valley and the massive urban population of Southern California. In May of 2026, his state, along with Arizona and Nevada, submitted their own proposal. It calls for cutting 3.2 million acre-feet of water use. These are not small cuts. They are painful, deep, and economically damaging. But to the upper basin, they are still not enough. They are temporary. They do not address the fundamental imbalance of the 1922 compact. So the states are deadlocked. The upper basin demands the lower basin give up its paper water rights permanently. The lower basin, while willing to make temporary cuts to save the reservoirs, refuses to surrender a legal entitlement that underpins their entire economy. It is a standoff with 100 years of baggage. A fight over history, law, and hydrology. Tom Bushatsky in Arizona and John Ensminger in Nevada have been on the front lines, managing 5 years of mandatory shortages. They have seen the damage firsthand. They know what is at stake: the farms, the cities, the industries, life as they know it. And time is up. The federal government is not waiting. Secretary Burgum's October 1st deadline is absolute. And to oversee this historic intervention, he has brought in new leadership. On June 17, 2026, Aubrey Betancourt took the reins as the acting commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, the federal agency that literally runs the dams. Her appointment stunned many. She is not a career bureaucrat. She is a farmer, a California farmer who understands intimately what it means to depend on this water. She is now the single most powerful person on the river, tasked with either brokering an impossible peace or imposing a federal solution that will infuriate everyone. Everyone is staring at the lakes. They watch the bathtub rings. They track the elevations. They debate the percentages. It is the most visible, tangible sign of the crisis, and it is a complete distraction. Here is what they are not telling you. The real collapse is not happening on the surface. It is happening underground. Silently and visibly, a recent peer-reviewed study using years of NASA satellite data revealed a truth that is far more terrifying than the shrinking reservoirs. The groundwater in the Colorado River Basin, the water stored in natural underground aquifers, is being depleted too. 4 times faster than the water in Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Since 2002, the basin as a whole has lost 42.34 million acre-feet of fresh water. That is an almost unimaginable volume. But here is the critical number. 65% of that loss, 27.8 million acre-feet, was not river water. It was groundwater, drained from aquifers that took thousands of years to fill. Think about what that means. For 2 decades, as the river dried up, farmers and cities did what any rational person would do. They started drilling wells. They began pumping from the ground to make up for the water they could no longer get from the river. It was an invisible solution to a very visible problem, but it was not a solution. It was a withdrawal from a savings account that nobody was tracking. The satellites, named GRACE and GRACE-FO, measure tiny changes in Earth's gravity field. A massive loss of underground water makes the ground itself infinitesimally lighter. The satellites can detect that change from space. They have been watching the American West get lighter and lighter for 20 years. They have been documenting a hydrological collapse that is happening completely out of sight. This is the great unspoken threat. The reservoirs, in theory, can be refilled. A few historically wet winters, like the one in 2023, can add dozens of feet to the lakes. That provides a buffer, a moment of relief. But the aquifers do not refill on human timescales. Once that water is gone, it is gone for centuries, maybe millennia. So while the negotiators in smoke-filled rooms argue over allocations of a few 100,000 acre-feet, the ground beneath their feet is falling out. They are fighting over the scraps on the table while the floor itself is giving way. The crisis is not just that the river is shrinking. The crisis is that the entire water system, surface and subterranean, is being drained to exhaustion, and the part that is draining fastest is the part no one can see. The part that has no legal framework, no interstate compact, no federal oversight. It is a race to the bottom of a well that is much, much deeper than anyone ever imagined. In a crisis this deep, any sign of relief feels like a solution. It is a dangerous illusion. These are the stopgap measures, the temporary fixes, the political maneuvers that create the appearance of progress while the fundamental problem gets worse. On July 14, 2026, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which serves 19 million people, announced a deal. They agreed to leave 200,000 acre-feet of their water in Lake Mead, a conservation measure designed to prop up the failing reservoir. In exchange, the federal government, using money from the Inflation Reduction Act, will pay them $65 million. That is $325 for every acre-foot of water they do not use. On the surface, it sounds like a win. Water is being saved. The lake gets a small temporary boost. Money is flowing to incentivize conservation. But look closer at the math. The structural deficit, the gap between what flows into Lake Mead and what gets taken out, is over 1.2 million acre-feet per year. This deal, celebrated in press releases, plugged less than 17% of that hole for 1 year. It is a patch. A very expensive patch on a wound that requires major surgery. It does not create new water. It simply pays one user to take a little less for a little while. What happens next year when the money runs out? Or consider the city of Las Vegas, a city built on impossible spectacle in the middle of the Mojave Desert. As the crisis deepened, Las Vegas saw the writing on the wall. Its 2 original water intakes in Lake Mead were perched at elevations that looked terrifyingly high as the lake plummeted. So they did something audacious. They spent $1.5 billion to drill a third intake, a third straw that plunges deep into the lake to an elevation of 860 feet. Lower than Dead Pool, lower than anything else. It is an engineering marvel. It guarantees that Las Vegas can keep drinking even if the lake drops so low that Hoover Dam stops releasing water to California and Arizona. John Ensminger, the general manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, secured his city's survival. He bulletproofed Las Vegas. But did he solve the problem? Or did he just create a new one? Las Vegas can now suck the lake dry past the point where anyone else can get a drop. This has not gone unnoticed by their neighbors. It creates incredible political tension. Is it fair for one city to engineer a private life raft while the rest of the ship is sinking? The third straw is the ultimate survival strategy for one, and a symbol of the coming chaos for everyone else. It is an illusion of safety. It guarantees access to a pool of water that is still shrinking. It ensures Las Vegas will be the last one with a straw in the glass. It does not stop the glass from being empty. This is the landscape Aubrey Betancourt inherits, a world of expensive patches and individual life rafts where everyone is fighting for their own survival. But no one is solving the collective crisis. These deals are not solutions. They are sedatives. They momentarily calm the nerves of the public and the politicians, but they do nothing to cure the underlying disease. The disease is that there is not enough water. There has not been enough for 100 years. And the climate is making sure there will be even less tomorrow. Every one of these temporary measures just kicks the can a little further down a road that ends at a cliff. The plan was audacious. The execution was nearly impossible. The consequences are now unavoidable. October 1st, 2026. That is the day the talking stops. That is the day Secretary Burgum and Commissioner Betancourt will unveil the federal government's plan. A plan for what happens after the 2007 Interim Guidelines expire. A plan for who gets water and who does not. No one knows exactly what it will contain. But the possibilities are all radical. It could mandate across-the-board percentage cuts for every water user in every state. It could prioritize cities over farms, forcing tens of thousands of acres of agricultural land to go fallow. That 70 to 80% of the river's water that goes to agriculture, that is where the real water is. And that is where the federal government will be looking. Fields of alfalfa in the desert, grown with Colorado River water to be shipped overseas as cattle feed, might become a luxury the nation can no longer afford. The federal plan could change the very rules of how the dams are operated, holding back more water in Lake Powell to protect its power generation at the direct expense of Lake Mead and the lower basin. It could, in theory, bypass Congress and the states to unilaterally declare that the 1922 Compact is null and void based on a new and terrifying hydrological reality. Whatever the federal government proposes, it will be challenged. Immediately, the states that feel they have been wronged will sue. The water districts will sue. The farmers will sue. The case will almost certainly end up at the one place where these disputes are ultimately settled. The Supreme Court of the United States. It would not be the first time. The court has weighed in on the Colorado River before, in landmark cases like Arizona v. California, but this would be different. This would be a case to decide the fate of the entire river, to divide a shrinking resource among 40 million desperate people. This is the endgame. The century of avoiding the hard choices is over. The era of building bigger dams and drilling deeper wells is over. The buffer is gone. The groundwater is disappearing. The climate is not cooperating. We are left with two paths. A last-minute, historic compromise between 7 states that have fought for a century, or a federal takeover that leads to a decade of legal warfare while the ecosystem collapses. The river itself is indifferent. It has carved canyons through this desert for 6 million years. It has seen droughts that make our current crisis look mild. The Colorado River will survive. The question is whether the civilization we built on its back will do the same. The clock does not just say December 31st anymore. It points to October 1st. And every day that passes, the choices get harder.